Welcome back and thanks for staying with us here on Your View. Now, it's been 4 years since 144 psychiatric patients died in the Life Esidimeni tragedy. Many died of starvation and neglect after the Gauteng Health Department cancelled its outsourced contract to save money, transferring thousands of patients to unregistered facilities. Now, joint hearing will now be conducted in the Higher Court, and in studio this evening, I'm joined by Christine Nxumalo, who lost her sister in that tragedy. Christine, a very good evening to you, and thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
I mean, you and I first met at the Commission of Inquiry, which was looking into these deaths, and I remember you being, as outspoken and on a mission to get justice for your sister as you are 4 years later after her death. For our viewers who might not know your story or, what happened to your sister, if you can, please, I know it's very traumatic to keep going over this, and you in fact said, you need to psych yourself up to having to continue to speak about this story. But for our viewers who don't know, where was your sister staying, and maybe even what led to her death?
Yeah, it's a very difficult thing. So every time you have to talk about it, you really have to relive, each moment as you talk about it. My sister was initially at Randfontein, Life Esidimeni, and when this whole closure of the facilities happened, she was apparently moved to Cullinan, and then to Anchor, Siabadinga, and then to Precious Angels. And apparently that's where she passed away, at Precious Angels. So basically she had been in the life facility just over 2 years.
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, then we had the inquiry that was looking into these deaths, and it almost seemed as though with every testimony that was given, more information was revealed.
Yeah.
Would you say that the Deputy Chief Justice and those who worked on this inquiry did everything they could to uncover the truth?
They did. The arbitration process for me, for example, gave me bits and pieces of what had happened, because all I knew at the time was that she was alive and then she died at Precious Angels, and at some point she had gone to Cullinan. But what the arbitration did for someone like me is it gave bits and pieces in between what may have happened. So it did open up for different things for different families or different family members. So yes, I think the team that worked in trying to get the answers did everything they could. But I don't think everybody who was testifying was as open and as honest as they should have been.
And I suppose that's where my next question is. If they did everything to uncover the truth, and then we had the investigations, why is it that no one has been held to account? No one has been prosecuted?
Look, it's been a question on our minds for a very long time. Before the arbitration even happened, we had requested an inquest, but we were denied that. So the arbitration was basically to confirm that indeed these people, our loved ones did not, or they died at the hands of the Department of Health. So in that regard, we got our answer, But the arbitration, what it did is it actually gathered as much information as it possibly could to hand over to the NPA as to what had happened since then to today.
Sure.
They say they were doing their own investigations, and what they found, unfortunately, was not enough to put a particular person in jail. The evidence is there, but it's not pointing to a particular person. So hence the call for an inquest.
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned earlier on you had requested an inquest to begin with. What was the reason given as to why that inquest was not granted?
We never got an answer. And, at the time, my sister, we had just got news of my sister's passing. And at the time, we were trying to get her body. And at the time, we were opening a case. So we wrote to the NPA and requested an inquest, but we never really got a response for why they didn't do it. Yeah.
And then news breaks that the inquest will happen, and as you're saying, it's something that you had initially asked for anyway. The inquiry has now concluded, and they're saying, well, you know what, to get to the bottom of this, let's just have an inquest. How was that received by you? And also, I know you were part of a committee with some of the other relatives. How did they receive these news? Were you aware before the announcement was made that this is going to happen?
Look, after the arbitration, we've been on the NPA's head. We've literally been knocking at their doors every opportunity we got. So when the news of the inquest was announced, we were already, called in to say the evidence is not going to point to any particular person, so the only other option is to go through the inquest route. So the families were aware of it. I think we just needed them to announce it to the rest of the, I suppose, the country, but the families were aware of it. The news we received, look, it's hope. It gave us a bit of hope. We were disappointed that it wasn't done in the beginning. The arbitration gave us a bit of answers. The fact that it is happening for us is a glimmer of hope.
Sure. One of the concerns that have been raised regarding the inquest is, you know, the relatives having to relive that trauma. I mean, I remember sitting in that inquiry day after day, listening to the inhumane conditions that people died and then they were stored in. And I remember my editor at the time even coming to me and saying, I think you'll need counseling after this.
I think everybody that was attending that really needed to be debriefed because it was really traumatic.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Are you not concerned then going into the inquest that might take a toll on yourself and some of the other relatives? Are you willing to go through that again?
We have been talking about this for, I think, years now with the families. I think for us to not pursue this and not to go through this would be not fair. Because remember, our initial fight was to fight for our loved ones and, you know, to hold somebody accountable for what had happened. To not want to go through this, we'll never really heal. We'll never be able to have that closure we need. So unfortunately, it is a process that we have to go through in order to hold somebody accountable. It is not going to be easy. And it's you know, we've been in this, you know, like feeling, you know, the wound has been opened, you know, since the arbitration process. So it's still open. And this will just give us, you know, the opportunity to heal and, I suppose, get to a point of closure.
Sure. How hopeful are you that the inquest will yield the justice that you've been searching for, especially considering the fact that there's issues with the evidence as well? I mean, it's been years since these, you know, the psychiatric patients died, and there were issues with post-mortems that came out, the reasons why some of the people had died. Would that evidence even still be available?
Look, we can only hope. I mean, we do know that the number 144 is not a true reflection of how many people died. But it's the only number we have where there's post-mortems attached to. And unfortunately, that's all we have. So now, 4 years later, the evidence that they had gathered, we can only hope that it was preserved well enough to be used again, and that it will lead somewhere. Because I think with the arbitration, we realized that we knew that people were responsible, were accountable, were found to some degree guilty, or the fingers were pointing in their direction.
Sure.
But according to the NPA, to charge them criminally, the evidence was not strong enough. So we can only hope that the evidence that they have gathered, or what they will gather through this process, will definitely, even if it's just a few, but somebody needs to be held accountable, and this is for us to make sure that it never happens again.
Absolutely. And as we wrap up that conversation, you know, you touched on never happening again. We've seen in, you know, our hospitals, especially in Gauteng, the type of treatment that patients receive that is just not on. I mean, the elderly woman from Mamelodi who was chained to, you know, a steel chair without being given food and water. Would you say the department has taken any lessons from the Life Esidimeni tragedy? And I mean, we've got the president going to deliver his SONA tomorrow. What should he be prioritizing when it comes to healthcare, and especially when it comes to the treatment of psychiatric patients?
So the first part of your questions is, have they learned the lessons? To be honest with you, we don't think so. Because soon after the relocation of the patients from the NGOs to safer places, the very safer places that they were supposed to be in were doing the very same things that led to the Life Esidimeni. The attitudes of the people who were involved still stayed. So a lot or nothing has changed. If something has changed, it's very minimal, and you can't even measure it. And that is what our concern is. If we leave this matter halfway, it will mean that it's okay for them to continue doing that. And what the president should be prioritizing, the president you know what hurt, I think, most of the families is that last year, 2019, they did not even commemorate the Life Esidimeni tragedy. So it's almost as if they want to put it aside, like, it happened, we dealt with it, it's gone. It's not gone. Like many people have said, there's Life Esidimenis that are happening almost every single day. Mental health patients are not considered in their budgets, in the way they plan things. It's almost like they're non-existent. And the treatment that they receive is also not the quality that it should be. Knowing that these are vulnerable people, they need the care that they need. So no, we're not happy that things have changed. It's almost like there's a blanket cover that says, it happened, we dealt with it, we tried to solve this matter, let's move on. And unfortunately, if we don't hold people accountable, that will remain their attitude.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for joining us this evening. That's all we have time for. I do hope that this inquest, as you say, it offers a glimmer of hope. But I also do hope that we're not sitting like this 2, 3, 4 years from now having these same discussions.
I hope so too.
Christine Nxumalo, her sister, as I said earlier on, died in the Life Esidimeni tragedy. She's spoken about what government needs to do to prioritize mental health patients. We'll continue with more talk after this short ad break. Stay with us.